I hadn't been back up there in years. That's probably the simplest way to start it. Life just drifted. People move, relationships stall, jobs change, and the idea of driving 3.5 hours into the woods to sit in a small cabin starts sounding like more work than rest. But my boyfriend at the time, Colin, kept talking about it. He'd been up there with his family growing up. His uncle owned a few cabins on a stretch of land that backed into forest. No cell service, no internet, a wood stove, a creek that ran louder in spring, all the stuff people romanticize. We'd been on a long, messy break, not a breakup, not a dramatic one either. Just months of not knowing what we were doing, not really talking, not really moving on. When we started talking again, it felt easier to suggest a place than to talk about feelings. So we decided to go to the cabin. I was 24, he was 26. We'd been together on and off since college. I don't think either of us saw the trip as some big reset. It was more like, let's see if we can still exist in the same space without it feeling wrong. The cabin wasn't big. One main room, a tiny bedroom, a bathroom. There was a small porch on the front and a fire pit about 20 feet away with half-burnt logs stacked around it. Colin unlocked the door and went inside to start airing the place out. I stayed outside because I didn't feel like breathing in the stale cabin smell yet. I set my bag on the porch and wandered a little, not far, just pacing around the front clearing. There wasn't anyone else nearby. The nearest cabin was like a quarter-mile down the dirt road, trees thick on both sides. You couldn't see anything except woods. It was normal. Birds, wind in leaves, nothing weird. I remember bending down to pick up a stick near the fire pit and thinking about how stupid it was that I still associated this place with being younger, like it had frozen in time, even though I obviously hadn't. That's when I saw someone walking toward the cabin from the road. He came from the direction we'd driven in, just stepping out from between the trees onto the open dirt stretch. I didn't feel scared, not even alert. People hike out there, hunters use the land, locals walk around sometimes. It wasn't unusual to see someone. He was older. He had on a camo jacket. I remember noticing his boots because they looked heavy, like actual work boots, not hiking shoes. He walked slow. I stood up straight, still holding the stupid stick, like I didn't know what to do with my hands. He lifted one hand in a half wave. "Hey," he said. I said, "Hey," back. He stopped like 10 feet from me, didn't step onto the porch, didn't get closer. He looked past me at the cabin door, like he was checking if someone else was inside. "Y'all staying here?" he asked. I said, "Yeah, just for the weekend." He nodded like that confirmed something for him. "I'm out hunting," he said. "Just hanging around." That was a strange way to phrase it. Not that he was tracking anything or checking traps or even what he was hunting. Just hanging around. I didn't comment on it. He asked if we'd just arrived. I said yes. He asked how long we were staying. I said probably 2 nights. Another nod. He didn't smile. His face stayed neutral the entire time. Not friendly, not angry, more empty. He stood there after that, like maybe he expected me to ask something. I didn't. Finally he said, "All right then." Then he turned and walked back the way he came. I watched him until he disappeared into the trees. I don't know why I kept watching. It just felt automatic. When I went inside and told Colin, I framed it casually. Some guy walked up, said he was hunting. Colin shrugged and said that happens sometimes. He didn't seem concerned. He'd grown up with this place. To him, it was normal. I didn't push it. Looking back, I don't think I was scared yet. I was just aware. That night, we grilled hot dogs, sat by the fire, drank a little. The conversation was awkward in that familiar way where you know each other too well to pretend, but not well enough anymore to be comfortable. We went to bed around midnight. Next day, we took a short walk on one of the trails, skipped rocks at the creek, ate sandwiches, tried to act like a normal couple. It almost worked. Late afternoon, we were both inside. I was sitting on the bed scrolling through photos on my phone, deleting old stuff. Colin was in the main room trying to get the old radio to pick up a station. There was a knock on the door. We both froze in that instinctive way where you look at each other first. Colin said, "Hello," without opening it. A man's voice answered. "Open up." No introduction, no greeting. Colin asked who it was. "Open the door," the voice said again. I felt my stomach drop. Colin asked what he wanted. The voice said I need to come inside. Colin looked at me. I shook my head. He said, "No, Then the voice got sharper. "Open the door." Colin told him to leave. Another pause. I recognized the voice. It was the same man. I mouthed that to Colin. His face changed when I did. The man outside started knocking again. Colin raised his voice and told him we were calling the police. The knocking stopped. We thought that was it. Then the man said through the door, "You don't want to do that." Colin repeated that we were calling. Silence. We waited. Colin finally moved toward the window near the door and peeked out. "He's gone," he said. We didn't open the door. We didn't go outside. We were just trying to process what had just happened. Colin saying the guy was drunk, or confused, or thought this was his friend's cabin. None of those explanations felt right, but I didn't have a better one. We locked the door, checked the windows, pulled the curtains closed. That evening felt wrong in a way I can't describe cleanly, like a low-level sense that something had shifted. We didn't light a fire outside. We didn't grill. We talked about leaving, but it was already getting dark. The road was narrow and unlit. Neither of us loved the idea of driving tired and tense, so we stayed. We went to bed early. Neither of us slept much. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to a loud, cracking sound. My half-asleep brain thought a tree branch had fallen, a sharp, explosive noise. I sat up. Colin was already sitting up too. Another crack. Then another. Gunshots. There was no mistaking it. The sound was close. Then we heard wood splinter. Something hit the cabin. I started shaking. My body just started doing that uncontrollable tremble thing. Colin rolled off the bed and onto the floor. "Get down," he whispered. Another shot. Something punched through the wall near the window. You could hear the impact inside the room. Colin grabbed his phone. No service. He crawled toward the main room anyway, staying low. I followed. Another shot, then another. They weren't rapid fire. They were spaced out, like someone was aiming. We heard at least 6 shots, maybe more. I lost count. At some point, the shots stopped. We didn't move. We didn't speak. We just waited. After what felt like forever, Colin checked his phone again. 1 bar. He called 911. The call dropped twice before it went through. He whispered while he talked. Gave the address as best he could. Explained someone had fired at the cabin. The dispatcher told us to stay inside and keep low. We waited. I don't know how long it took for deputies to arrive. When we finally saw flashing lights through the trees, I started crying. The deputies approached with their guns out. They knocked and identified themselves. We opened the door. They walked around and found multiple bullet holes in the walls. One had gone through the living room wall and lodged in a cabinet. Another went through the bedroom wall near where my head had been. One deputy whistled quietly when he saw that. They asked if we'd seen anyone. We told them about the man who claimed to be a hunter. There had been other calls. A few cabins down the road had also been shot at. One couple had been grazed by a bullet. Another person took a hit in the arm, non-life-threatening, but still. No one had caught the shooter. They drove us out of there that night. The police never found anyone. But I know who I think it was. I think it was the man who walked up to me in the daylight. The man who asked how long we were staying. The man who wanted us to open the door. Maybe he really hunted. Maybe he really wandered those woods often. But I don't think that night was random. I don't think he just happened to choose our cabin. How close that bullet came to my head. Sometimes I think about how calm he sounded when he asked us to open the door. Every once in a while, I still think about that trip, like a small heavy object I carry around. Something that reminds me how thin the line is between normal and catastrophic. One moment I was standing outside holding a stick, talking to a stranger in the woods. Less than 24 hours later, someone was trying to shoot us through the walls of a cabin. I don't tell this story often, not because it's unbelievable. I just don't know what to do with it. I lived in that place because it was cheap. That's the main reason. I was in my late 20s, working a job outside the city, and I didn't really care where I lived as long as it was close enough that I didn't have to sit in traffic every morning. It was a narrow 2-bedroom house that had been split off from a bigger place at some point, like someone chopped it in half and said, "Good enough." The walls were thin, the doors were cheap, and you could hear everything. Not like footsteps, just the sense of movement, like air shifting when someone walked past. I'd been there about a year alone. Rent was fine when I was splitting it with myself, but then my hours got cut for a while, and I started doing the math and it wasn't great. I didn't want to move. I'd already moved twice that year, and I was tired of it. So I put up a post online looking for a roommate. Just room for rent, utilities included. I think I added, must have a job. But I didn't really enforce that. Most people who replied were weird in obvious ways. One guy wanted to store car parts in the living room. One woman asked if I'd be okay with her boyfriend visiting every night. Stuff like that. Then this one message came in that was just normal, short, polite, no emojis, no oversharing. Said his name was Alex. Said he worked delivery jobs and was looking for something temporary. Asked how much the deposit was and when he could see the place. He showed up the next day. He didn't bring much with him, just a backpack, no car. He walked up from the street. I thought maybe someone dropped him off. He was clean though, not homeless looking, just plain. Brown hair, kind of thin, average height. You wouldn't remember him if you passed him again. I'm not even sure I'd recognize him now. We talked in the kitchen for like 10 minutes. He didn't ask many questions, didn't look around much either. Just nodded when I explained the bills and the rules. When I asked about his work, he said he did delivery stuff and left it at that. I assumed Dash or something. It wasn't my business. He paid the deposit in cash that night. I didn't think much of it. A lot of people do that. The first weird thing, if I'm being honest, wasn't even that weird. It was just that he didn't sleep. Or at least I never noticed him sleeping. I work early mornings, so I'm usually in bed by 10 or 11. The first week he was there, I'd go to bed and he'd be in the living room, sitting on the couch, not watching TV, just sitting there with the lights off. I asked him once if he wanted the lamp on and he said no, he was fine. In the morning, he'd still be there. Same spot, same clothes sometimes, not always but sometimes. I started paying attention after that. I never heard him snoring or moving around at night. Never heard his door close. I'd wake up to use the bathroom at 3 or 4 and the house felt the same, like he'd never moved. I told myself some people just have weird sleep schedules. I've worked nights before. It messes you up. The second thing was the name stuff. I was home one afternoon and a food delivery guy knocked on the door. Alex answered it before I could get there. I heard him say, "Yeah, that's mine, Mike." I stopped in the hallway because my name is Mike. When I asked him about it, he looked confused for a second, then laughed, kind of. Said the order was under my name because he didn't have an account or something. It wasn't a good explanation, but it also wasn't worth pushing. I didn't want to be that guy who freaks out over nothing. Then it happened again with a package. I heard my name again. The driver said Mike, and Alex said yeah. I confronted him a little more directly that time. Asked why he was using my name. He apologized right away. Said he didn't know why he did that. Said it was a habit. That answer didn't make sense either, but the way he said it made me drop it. He looked genuinely embarrassed, like he'd been caught doing something small and stupid. He never got mail addressed to his own name. Ever. Everything that came was either generic or under my name. He never had visitors, not once. No friends, no family, no girlfriend, nothing. He didn't talk on the phone, at least not where I could hear. And again, I could hear a lot through those walls. He also didn't leave much. He said he did delivery work, but I never saw him get ready for it. No uniform, no car keys, nothing. Sometimes he'd be gone for hours, sometimes he'd be there all day. No pattern I could figure out. I started locking my bedroom door when I went to work. That wasn't something I'd ever done before. I didn't tell myself it was because of him. I told myself it was just smart. But I'd lived with other roommates before and never felt the need. And the ID thing. I went to grab my wallet one morning and it wasn't where I left it. I don't lose things easily. I put them in the same place every time. I checked my jacket, my bag, the kitchen counter. Nothing. I was already late, so I left without it and figured I'd look later. When I got home that night, my wallet was on my bed, just sitting there. I opened it and my ID was gone. Everything else was still there. Cash, cards, all of it. Just the ID missing. I confronted him immediately. I didn't plan what to say. I just walked into the living room and asked him why he had my ID. He didn't deny it. That was the scariest part. He just nodded and said he was sorry. Said he needed it for something and he was going to put it back. When I asked what he needed it for, he said work. I asked what kind of work needs someone else's ID, and he didn't answer. He just kept apologizing, over and over, like he was reading it off a list. I told him he had 3 days to move out. I didn't care about the deposit. I didn't care about the rent. I just wanted him gone. He agreed immediately, said 3 days was fine. Those 3 days were, I don't know. He stayed in his room more, but I still didn't hear him sleep. I kept my door locked even when I was home. I started sleeping with my phone under my pillow, which is stupid, but that's what I did. On the third night, I went to bed early because I had an early shift again. I remember being annoyed because I could smell something in the hallway. I thought it was the trash. Then I thought it was the lawn outside. It took me a minute to realize it was gasoline. I sat up in bed. The smell got stronger fast, strong enough that it burned my nose. I got out of bed and tried the door. It was locked. That didn't make sense. My bedroom door didn't lock from the outside. I tried it again, nothing. I started yelling his name, telling him to open the door. I heard movement in the hallway, and then something sloshing, like liquid in a container. I could see it under the door, dark spreading line, soaking into the carpet. I remember being confused. Like my brain was trying to figure out what explanation made this not what it was. Then I smelled it even stronger, and my chest tightened, and I started banging on the door. I thought he was going to light it. I don't know why. I just knew that was next. Then everything stopped. The smell was still there, but nothing else was happening. I unlocked the window and climbed halfway out before realizing it didn't open far enough to fit through. That's when I called the police. They told me to stay calm. They told me to get out if I could. I told them I couldn't open the door. The police came, fire department too. They searched the house. There was no sign he'd ever been there beyond the few things he left behind. The room was basically empty. No clothes, no documents, no ID, nothing with a name on it. They asked me for his full name. I didn't have one. They asked where he worked. I didn't know. They asked if I had a photo. I didn't. No one ever found him. No record, no Alex, no connection to my name that they could find. I grew up in Pennsylvania. People just said they lived out by the old quarry or past the feed store, and everyone else knew what that meant. My parents bought our house in the late 90s. 2-story and a big maple tree in the front yard that dropped helicopter seeds all over the driveway every spring. There were 4 of us in the house. My mom, my dad, my older sister, and me. I was the youngest. My sister was 5 years older, which might as well have been 20 in kid years. She had her own world, her own friends, her own music, and her own lock on her bedroom door that my parents pretended not to notice. I spent most of my time either outside or in the basement messing around with old toys and half-broken electronics my dad brought home from work. My dad worked for a local school district. He fixed boilers, replaced ceiling tiles, patched holes in drywall. He came home tired most days and usually smelled like oil. My mom worked part-time and handled pretty much everything else in the house. Bills, groceries, making sure we were alive and fed and not doing anything too illegal. We weren't poor, but everything in our house had a second life. Secondhand couch, secondhand kitchen table, secondhand bikes. My bike was red at one point, I think. But by the time I had it, it was mostly a mix of rust and chipped paint with one working brake. It still rode fine, which was all I cared about. The neighborhood was a long loop of roads with woods filling in the gaps between houses, like scraggly trees, thorn bushes, and patches of tall grass that nobody bothered to clear. There was an informal trail system kids had worn into the ground over decades. No signs, no fences, just dirt paths that cut behind houses, around drainage ditches, and eventually out toward an old stretch of unused land near the quarry. Everybody used those trails. Kids walking to each other's houses, people walking dogs, teenagers sneaking off to smoke. It was just part of the area, like sidewalks, but unofficial. One of those trails passed near an abandoned house. I don't know when it was built or who originally lived there. Even as a kid, it was already that abandoned house. Like it had always been empty as far as anyone could remember. It sat back from the trail, partially hidden by trees, with a long, sagging porch and windows that were either broken or boarded over. The roof dipped in the middle, like the house was slowly folding in on itself. Nobody I knew had ever been inside it. At least nobody admitted to it. There were rumors, the usual kid stuff. Homeless guy lived there, dealer stash house, cult, squatters. None of it was consistent, and none of it came from anyone with actual proof. Mostly it was just there. When I was older, I started walking the trails alone more often. My sister was too cool to hang out with me, and my parents were usually busy or tired. Walking around felt like freedom. I could be gone for an hour, and nobody asked many questions as long as I came back before dark. I knew the abandoned house was along one of the longer trails, but I usually avoided that branch. Not because I thought it was haunted or anything like that. It just made me uncomfortable in a way I didn't really have words for. One afternoon in late summer, I decided to take that trail anyway. I had my cheap earbuds in, connected to a little MP3 player that only held like 30 songs. One earbud worked better than the other, so I usually wore just the good one and left the other dangling. I wasn't in a hurry, just walking, kicking at rocks. The trail narrowed as it got closer to the abandoned house. Trees grew closer together there, blocking some of the sunlight. It always felt cooler in that stretch, even on hot days. You couldn't see the house right away. First you saw the edge of the porch through branches, then the outline of the roof, then the front wall. I slowed down. The house looked worse than usual that day. Or maybe I was just paying more attention. One of the boards over a front window had fallen off, leaving a dark, rectangular hole. The porch railing leaned outward, and a section near the steps had collapsed completely. I stood on the trail, like 30 or 40 feet away, and stared. I don't know what I expected to see. Probably nothing. At first, that's exactly what it looked like, just a dark, empty shell. Then I saw something in the front window, like something shifting. I pulled my earbud out and just stood there. There was a man standing inside the front room, near the broken window. I didn't see his whole body, just his upper half, from about the chest up. He was close enough to the window that I could see his face. He didn't look homeless in the way people usually mean when they say homeless. His clothes were dirty, but not falling apart. He had on what looked like a jacket. He wasn't doing anything threatening. He was just standing there, looking straight at me. No expression I could recognize. Just eyes on me. I just ran. I didn't think about whether I should tell someone or go get help or anything like that. I just ran down the trail, branches whipping my arms, tripping a couple times. Got back to the edge of my neighborhood and walked the rest of the way home, trying to act normal, even though I looked like I'd just sprinted a mile. My mom asked why I was sweaty. I said I'd been riding my bike. That was it. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell my sister. I didn't tell anyone. Part of it was embarrassment. Part of it was that I didn't know how to explain why it bothered me so much. He hadn't chased me. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't done anything except exist in a place he technically wasn't supposed to be. Saying there was a guy in the abandoned house didn't feel like enough to justify how scared I felt. So I kept it to myself. I avoided that trail for a while after that. Stayed closer to houses. Eventually, like kids do, I got lazy about it. Nothing bad happened when I avoided the house. Nothing bad happened when I didn't avoid it either. Life just kept going. School, homework, video games, trying to convince my parents to let me stay up later. A couple weeks later, I was hanging out with two friends from down the street. Sam and Jordan, both around my age. We rode bikes together a lot, traded games, built dumb ramps out of scrap wood. We were bored and riding around aimlessly, which was pretty much our default state. Jordan suggested taking the trail loop. I hesitated. Sam asked why. I said I just didn't like the abandoned house. They laughed. Not in a mean way, like the casual way kids laugh at anything that sounds slightly weak. Jordan said, "Dude, it's just an old house." I didn't mention the man. I don't know why. I didn't want to say it out loud. Maybe I was afraid they'd want to go check it out. We ended up taking the trail anyway. All three of us walked our bikes once the path got narrow. We were talking about a game Sam had gotten, arguing about which character was better, weird stuff. As we got closer to the house, I started paying attention to every sound. The cicadas were still loud, leaves rustling, a bird taking off from somewhere nearby. The house came into view. Nothing looked different from the last time I'd seen it. Same broken window, same porch. Sam threw a small rock at the side of the house. It made a dull thud against rotten wood. "See nothing," he said. We stood there on the trail. Jordan took a few steps closer, peering toward the front window. "I dare you to go inside," he said to Sam. Sam shook his head. "No way." They started going back and forth, half serious, half joking. I was looking at the front window. At first, it looked empty. But then I saw, not in the window this time, on the porch. A man stepped out of the front doorway. Same general look as before. Jacket, baseball cap, dirty clothes, older than I'd expected. He stood on the porch, one hand resting on the doorframe. Nobody said anything. The man looked at us. Jordan said, The man took a step forward. Sam dropped his bike. That snapped something in me. I just turned and ran. I heard footsteps behind me. Not just one person. More than one set. Sam and Jordan running too. I heard someone yell, but I couldn't tell who. Then I heard a different sound. A sharp, metallic clatter. Something hit the ground near me. I felt a sting on my calf, like I'd been snapped with a rubber band, but I didn't stop. We burst out of the trail back into the neighborhood, scattering in different directions without planning it. I ran straight home. I didn't slow down until I was inside my house with the door slammed and locked. A minute later, my mom came into the living room asking what was wrong. I tried to talk and just started crying. I don't remember everything I said. My dad came home early from work after my mom called him. Sam's parents and Jordan's parents got involved too. All three of us ended up sitting in Sam's living room, retelling what happened in overlapping, inconsistent ways. The adults called the police. They didn't find anyone. They checked around the outside of the house but didn't go in. Said it wasn't safe structurally. Probably a squatter who got spooked by kids and tried to scare us off. Later that night, when I was changing clothes, I noticed a small cut on my calf, a thin line with dried blood. I told my mom. She cleaned it and put a bandage on. I could tell she was thinking about the thing I'd said the man threw. After that, my parents didn't let me walk the trails alone anymore. They talked about moving, but we didn't have the money. The abandoned house stayed abandoned. Life kept going. Middle school, high school, friends drifting apart, new friends, first job, first car. The trail system slowly got more overgrown. Fewer kids used it. People stayed closer to streets. The abandoned house eventually got partially boarded up by the township. New boards over some windows. A no trespassing sign nailed to a tree nearby. Nobody ever mentioned a man living there again. I moved out in my early 20s. Got an apartment in a nearby city. I didn't think about the house much. Then about 3 years ago, my mom called me. She sounded weird on the phone, unsettled. It was about the abandoned house. During the inspection before demolition, they found human remains inside, skeletal. They didn't know how long the body had been there. No ID. They were investigating. I asked where exactly in the house they found the body. She said the front room, near the window. My mom eventually said, "Do you remember that thing you told us about when you were a kid? About the man there?" I said yes. She said it's probably not related. Just weird. I agree with her. Logically, it probably isn't related. There are a lot of explanations that don't involve anything strange. The man we saw could have been someone else entirely. The remains could have been there long before or long after. Maybe the man was a squatter who left. Maybe he passed away somewhere else. Maybe the body wasn't connected to any of it. I just don't know.